This is Autohaus Z, and today we're doing a install and review on these JSP Billet engine mounts. So these engine mounts offer two different mounting positions. You can mount these at the OEM height, or you can actually go 9.5 millimeters lower than factory, which lowers the center of gravity. This fits the OEM oil filter sandwich plate and then also offers increased clearance if you're running a aftermarket sandwich plate and then plus oil cooler lines. These are also compatible with the OEM braces that brace the engine block to the trans. And you guys probably know majority of you guys are missing those. And then on the intake side, for those running a dry sump system, this will offer increased clearance for the dry sump oil pump. So in this box also, I have some Cusco engine mounts from Battle Garage RS. So potentially with these engine mounts and the Cusco mounts, we should be able to get the engine theoretically 20 mil lower than factory. Today's experiment is to see if we can make that happen. Also special with these are the AC compatible versions. So these are the prototypes I'm testing for JSP. I have a factory AC compressor and AC compressor bracket. We're gonna 100% make sure there's clearance for the AC components. And then also Mr. John wanted to see if these are compatible with the Cusco engine mounts. So hopefully we should make all that happen today. So another thing interesting about my car, it's got a Zenki power steering rack, which is physically bigger than a Koki power steering rack. We're gonna see if 20 mil lower, this will clear all the power steering rack stuff as well. So let's find out. Alright, so quick overview before we disassemble my car. I know there's a couple points Mr. John said there possibly could be some clearance issues. So I know he was saying the oil pan gets tight against the subframe. I currently have some old saggy Cusco engine mounts and it looks like we will have potentially room to go another 10 mil, so let's cross our fingers. Looks like alternator bracket has to come out to get this passenger engine mount. If we go back here, the brace from the trans to the engine block, it's already really close to this power steering rack, so potentially I'm willing to modify this to get that 20 mil lower, but we'll see where the clearance ends up once we install everything. I'm actually missing my driver's side one because of the J160, and so the good thing about this kit, if you're doing the J160 swap, the transmission tunnel clearance is really close up there, so these engine mounts would help out for those doing a transmission swap like this. Also noticed this brace for the factory TVIS intake manifold will probably have to be sacrificed in order to run the JSP mounts, which may or may not be an issue if you're running like a small port manifold or ITB, something like that. But it just sucks because I hate getting rid of OEM pieces like this. So another issue with this J160, because tranny tunnel clearance is so tight. Normally when you change these engine mounts, you should be able to just jack up the engine one side or the other, or by the oil pan, and undo these mounts. But because the tunnel clearance is so tight, I think I might have to hang the engine from the top and actually drop my subframe. I know when I remove the trans, every time I have to undo the 4 bolts and lower the subframe just to get the trans out. So, alright, getting closer. Got the passenger side brace off, the intake brace, bolts for the engine mounts. Really quickly, that one right there is probably the toughest nut to get to for the engine mount, so I'll show you guys what tools I use. 17 millimeter easy red. A lot of different companies make this tool, but there's a flexible head with that raised edge, and I'll put this down there, break it loose as far as I can, and then I'll go down with the stubby 17. So pro tip for you guys, do undo this one from the top. So in preparation to fit the AC compressor, I took all my oil filter sandwich and the lines off. Yeah, these two are much easier. I'll get both of these from the top. Alright, here we are. I have the engine hanger over there just in case I had to hang the engine, but hopefully we don't get to that point. So if you're at home, block of wood under the oil pan or somewhere else sturdy on the engine. Alternator is out because this alternator bracket's got to go on top of the engine mount. I was hoping that if everything was loose, I could just finagle everything out. Looks like that's not gonna happen, so there's a stud up here that this engine mount's stuck on, so I think I'm gonna pull that stud and then bolt the JSP mount and put the Cusco mount in place and then just try out that combo, lower this guy down and see where the clearance is at. Alright, got the driver's side assembly out. Why don't we do a quick comparison? I think it's interesting this reinforcing rib is like opposite on the JSP mount, which means there's not really a provision to put this intake brace, but I suppose if you wanted to, you could put a long spacer and then tap this to accept the bottom part of this intake brace. This came at the right time because these Cusco mounts I have are old and breaking off. So I'll assemble these guys and then we'll put it up in the car. You can tell this is a Cusco mount because I wrote Cusco on this many moons ago. So before we install this stuff, why don't we do a weight comparison really fast. OEM 113, JSP 109. Again, we're going to try the 9.5 millimeter position in tandem with the Cusco mount. Hopefully we'll get this engine 20 mil lower without having to modify too much. The instructions also say if you're putting it in the 9.5 millimeter position, add the engine mount spacers under the rubber mounts where they mount to the subframe. So we're gonna put this guy like that against the subframe. If you're running in the OEM height, you do not need to use this guy. Alright, so one piece of constructive criticism, I'd really like a dummy's guide to where all this hardware goes. This one takes all the, it looks like M10 hardware, so I think I'm gonna reuse the stud on the engine side, and then these two should go in here. I think we'll try it out, and then these should be for that one. Maybe we'll find out. All right, so here's how it works. The two smaller bolts, you get rid of the OEM stud that's up here, and then these two replace it, the JSP hardware. And back there, that one you reuse the OEM bolt because this brace actually covers that side of the engine mount, so you reuse that bolt. Yeah, you can tell by how much threads up there, this thing's gonna be really low, so we'll drop this in a second and see how low this thing gets. Yeah, quick tip when you're doing this, when everything's out, if you don't have compressed air, I would at least get like the computer air spray cans to spray out every single hole, because even with my car, even though there was bolts and all there, like a bunch of dust and grit came out, and you don't want to either ruin the threads or damage the block with stuff inside each bolt hole. And then similarly with the subframe, I would at least go across it with a towel, make sure no grit or garbage is in there. And then to give you guys some context, many moons ago when I was a Mercedes-Benz tech, we'd get cars with new engine mounts, and the engine mounts would fail shortly thereafter because rocks and stuff would accumulate up in here, and people would just torque down the engine mounts, and because they're liquid filled, very soon the engine mounts would fail because there'd be like a rock or something trapped in there and it would break through the liquid filled engine mount. So yeah, keep it clean. All right, let's do a weight comparison. 2.2 for the stock mount, and then looks like 1.1, so the JSP mount's just about a pound lighter on the driver's side. Alright, so some interesting things. Again, this is the AC compatible version of the kit. Just from the photos, it looks like there's a cut right here to accept the factory AC compressor bracket, and normally this would be at the same height right here for the rest of this ear. This has 3 mounting points as opposed to 4 on the OEM mount, and then you can see for the AC compressor either the OEM or the 9.5 mil lower mounting position. And included in the JSP kit is this black washer, and that'll go right behind this guy where this ear would normally go. Alright, so side by side, some interesting stuff. I just installed a gritty oil cooler kit on a customer car, and I had a really tough time fitting that oil filter sandwich plate. And with this, as you can see, it provides a whole lot more room. Like, I could have mounted the sandwich plate anywhere in this position. I'll show you guys the sandwich plate I was running. I actually had to clearance that edge also. So yeah, just to reiterate from the beginning, improved oil filter clearance for the oil filter sandwich plate and lines, especially for aftermarket units. Again, this will fit an OEM sandwich plate. So yeah, why don't we get this guy installed with our brand new Cusco mount. Again, you can tell this is Cusco because I said so. So this is the included hardware. Again, we're gonna run at the 9.5 mil lower position, so this will go under the engine mount in between the subframe. I got 3 bolts and 1 nut, and I'll show you guys in my car. Looks like I have 2 studs. I don't know if I added those studs or those are factory on the car, but I'm gonna leave those 2 studs in there and use the remaining hardware from the JSP kit. Another thing to note, the starter right there, and then you have to take the alternator out, so make sure you disconnect the negative side of the battery and don't hurt yourself. Alright, so pro tip, these 2 back bolts, don't try to go in through the front side or up top. I'll actually put a universal and extension and go this way for these 2 bolts for the engine mount. This is especially tight on a AC and power steering car, so go through this hole for these 2 bolts for that engine mount. I'm going to leave that nut off until we test the AC compressor. So this is held on by 2 bolts, the top one, and then the nut for the stud on the other side. So 14 mil and 15 mil. 15 mil is the nut. We are going to drop this guy down and see if the Cusco mounts plus the 9.5 mounting hole is compatible with each other. Alright, here it is. Looks like it works. So I don't have the 2 big end engine mount nuts in there right now, but yeah, looks like we're good. This and this rack gets really close, but still plenty of room. 100% honest, I think it's only a hair lower than where I was at, but that's not the fault of these engine mounts. I think because my original Cusco mounts were so old already, they already sagged probably more than 20 mil. So yeah, I'm excited to see when we put the car down, and we'll see what the top side looks like. Although one thing immediately apparent is this sump is much lower than the subframe now. Especially this clearance right here. I imagine if you had a different pan, it might not clear anymore. Again, because I run the SQ-J160 adapter, I can't run the OEM trans to engine mount brace on the driver's side. Someone with the T50 and the Cusco mounts with the JSP mounts will have to tell us if you can fit this brace in there. I think the only place it would contact would be this mount for the power steering rack, but I'd like to find out for sure. Alright, so car on the floor. I take it back, this is a lot lower than before. And some points of reference under this carbon bar. I used to not be able to do that this freely. So yeah, from the top side, it's really apparent. The engine's a lot lower now. Alright, so I'm going to put in the 2 end nuts for the engine mounts for sure. Get this guy permanently locked down, and then we will go ahead and fit the OEM AC compressor and bracket and see if everything's good there. But yeah, success so far. Alright, so engine mounts are bolted in and finalized. The other thing Mr. John requested was to see if the OEM compressor would still work with the AC compatible engine mounts. So I have the OEM AC compressor bracket bolted up, that black washer that goes behind this bolt hole. I'm gonna install the compressor right now, check the belt alignment and everything, but so far so good. I think that was the issue, was Mr. John didn't have an AC compressor, and if you guys probably already know how hard those things are to come by nowadays. Pretty nostalgic. You can tell I haven't had the AC compressor on this thing for a long time. So yeah, compressor installed. I just took off the alternator belt as an example, but yeah, the belt looks dead nut straight with the crank pulley. Cool. Yeah, I would say we're good to go on being AC compatible. Alright, it's currently 2 a.m., but I was also too excited. That's why I wanted to finish up this car. First of all, a sincere thank you to the JSP team. Thank you, Mr. John, Mrs. Stacy, Mr. Levin, for allowing me the opportunity to test and film the new billet engine mounts, especially this being the prototype AC compatible version. I mean, I feel really blessed for this opportunity. If you guys like this video and want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment in the description below. What did we learn today? The JSP billet mounts also work with the Cusco mounts for a total of a 19.5 millimeter drop, lowering the center of gravity. Some of my random thoughts. Install went a lot more straightforward. For sure, these are easier to service than the OEM mounts. I'll have to look back at the video, but I think you lose 1 pound using the JSP mounts also. But this should be really good for center of gravity. Grant saw me install this. He said the car should drive a lot different, so I'll drive it and I'll find out and report for you guys if the center of gravity changed the driving characteristics of this car. I'm not going to drive it yet because I lowered the engine almost an inch. I can tell the pinion angle is going to change, so I'm going to double check the pinion angle before I actually drive this car hard. You lose the brace, the OEM brace for the intake, which may not matter if I'm going ITBs in the future, but for people who are doing resto mods, and I don't foresee myself doing standalone anytime soon, so it sucks that I had to lose that OEM intake brace. But also worth noting, I did not have to cut, grind, or modify anything. And for you guys that have been doing this for a long time, a bolt-in part for a Corolla is not usually bolt-in. I was shocked. Maybe I shouldn't have been shocked. It's a JSP part, but I was shocked that no cut, drill, clearance for these mounts anywhere. Period. Thank you guys again for watching. My dog really wants to go home. Thank you again, Mr. John, for allowing me this opportunity. Thank you guys again for all the support. Catch you guys next time. Take care.